So, thank you so much, Jeanie and Kathy, for being a part of the Breakfast with Boyden series today. Welcome. Jeanie Kim is the Vice President of Development, and Kathy Ash is the Vice President of Advancement Administration and Chief of Staff, both with Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And I'm so excited to talk with you both today. I'd love to sort of center our conversation around building teams and hiring staff. I know you both have done this throughout your career, so we would love to talk a bit more about that. Jeanie, maybe I'll start with you. What's the trick? What do you look for in a candidate as you're interviewing to hire someone onto the advancement team? Would love to hear a bit more.
Well, first of all, I have to say, working with Boyden and you in particular has been really terrific because you understand the values of LMU and what we're trying to build. And Kathy and I have worked really hard to rebuild the major gifts team. And we look for people who want to be a part of a team and who want to make team culture stronger. And I think that expresses itself in how curious people are and how they've done their homework or how they articulate their experience. But we're really clear that we are building a very collaborative team, and that with every new person who joins, it isn't simply that somebody's joining that team, they have to contribute and make that team culture stronger. So we lay that out up front and engage in a conversation with the candidates about that.
Great.
And I will just jump in and say, because ironically, this is how Jeanie and I do interviews even, right? We tag team off of each other. But I would say this, more than anything, I think we've narrowed this down to we are looking for a candidate in a candidate. We are looking for not just their how, but their why. And if they can articulate that why, there are other things because it's about both aptitude and attitude. But if they can articulate that why, there's an energy around why they want to do this job, fundraising, then I think for us, that immediately means that we're a step closer to figuring out and working with them to see if their skill and their attitude and their aptitude fits with our team.
I love that. Sometimes the why is so important. So, Kathy, maybe I'll jump to you for the next question. LMU is a Jesuit institution. How do you hire for mission, and what are some of the things you're looking for?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I think for us, actually, the LMU has a superpower, and the Jesuit part, absolutely. And you know that, having, I think, worked with many Jesuit institutions, having a Jesuit education yourself, right? So the charisms and roots of the Jesuit order are a huge part of who LMU is and aspires to be, right? So, and I think most of us who are Jesuit educated, can rattle those off, right? But, the encouragement of learning, the education of the whole person, meaning mind, body, and spirit, right? And then service. And the service component of LMU is very strong. But the superpower piece is that we have an added thing that I don't know of other institutions that have this. We have the religious women that are also a part of the founding of Loyola Marymount University. And I think layering on their charisms is really the icing on the cake, because they so dovetail with both what the Jesuits are about, but then that expanded sense of sort of the being a part of what justice and dignity means for everyone. And so we are able to use those really to frame conversations with candidates, not a Catholic thing at all, but really an ethical underpinning of both our mission and the work we do. And I think we are able to use that in a way to really draw people out and talk about, because in fundraising, so many of those things matter, right? So we're able to really, really use that. I feel like it gives us an advantage. I've worked at as Jeannie has and you have, other institutions, certainly in higher ed, right? And they're fantastic colleges and universities, but they don't have that superpower. That's not something that you're allowed to or can be talking about. And it's a huge part of who we are. And I think speaking with candidates about that also gives us a sense of how they're going to be able to either manage that, deal with that, or not.
And I'll just add that since not all of the candidates that we end up hiring are Jesuit educated or have worked at a Jesuit institution, centering the conversation around service or inclusivity or justice, as Kathy mentioned, and asking them to, talk about their interest and experience in furthering those aspects of our mission. And certainly with service, people talk about their own experience, and it provides a pathway for them to see themselves in this context. Because for many people we've interviewed, this might be the first Jesuit institution that they've interviewed at.
Yep. So, what tips might you offer? I mean, thank you for giving that framework. So, what are some tips you might offer to managers as they are interviewing candidates? It could be sort of how do you interview for the technical side, the personality side, and thinking about who might be a great colleague to the rest of advancement.
Um, I'm going to tackle one piece of that question first,
Great.
which is something that Kathy and I have found to be um, very useful for us is to ask a slightly unexpected question. We like to see how candidates do thinking on their feet.
Mhm.
So we might ask them to tell us a story or to talk about an experience. And we find sometimes the candidates are surprised because they simply expect us to ask about their metrics or the gifts that they've raised. And we start with a question about who are you as a person? Why are you doing this work? Um, Sometimes I will ask, you know, on impromptu, give me your best pitch on a particular, fundraising topic like scholarships.
Mhm.
And we get to see how creative somebody is, how resourceful they are, especially if they've done their homework about LMU and can tie it back to mission or some aspect of what makes us distinctive.
And I'll just chime in and say that I agree with all of those things. I think the other thing that Jeannie and I do from the very beginning, and it ties back to your previous questions, we are very intentional and transparent with candidates about the fact that we're interested in their experience, but we're also really, really looking for in the interview sort of their energy, right? And we're clear that we're looking for people who will be additive to our team in those ways, right? In both culture and we talk about culture in every interview, and not just oh, let us tell you about the culture of our office, right? But we talk about the fact that we have intentionally built a team, right, that cares about each other, right, as much as the work, and that is that there is a team spirit, not just sort of in name only. We tell stories about things our team has done for each other, right? It's the little things, and I think we do bring those into even our initial screening interviews with candidates, so we make sure that they understand from the beginning exactly what the goal is for us in choosing the right candidate, right? Experience is important, and to Jeannie's part, we don't pretend that experience doesn't matter, but we also are very clear that attitude, and sort of how people come to the work, and I think the things Jeannie was talking about, curiosity, having done your homework, those sorts of things are important to us.
Excellent. And thank you for touching on culture. I would love to talk a little bit about that. I know we have partnered with you on maybe 15, 16 searches, and I know that adding new folks onto the team certainly can shift the culture, and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a challenge. And maybe you can, talk a little bit about how adding new folks onto the team, has shifted the culture within LMU
Oh, I'd love
or
to
in any
talk.
advancement office.
No, I would love to talk about this because
Great.
we do have members of the team who predate me, who might have been very much kind of out for themselves because that was the previous culture.
Hmm.
And with the addition of new team members and the changing of the culture, where I understand that information travels through relationships, and that if people are communicating, we can have bigger and better gift conversations through
Sure.
collaboration. So I've seen team members who were very much focused on themselves change in their outlook and are sharing information, are inviting team members to work with them. And I also just hear from new team members who are coming from workspaces where it was very metric driven, but not very collaborative. They understand that I care about metrics as much as anybody,
Hmm.
but that's not what I'm leading with. I want better gift conversations. You know, I want to provide more tools for the fundraisers to be able to do their work.
And I would say it starts in the interview process because back to we're very clear with candidates that that is our intention to build a team, right? That has a very positive and collaborative culture. In an industry where that isn't always right the case, because again, when you are very metrics driven, sometimes it feels like a competition. Here, I think we're very clear that it is a collaboration. And then I think it after, as when new candidates start, Jeanie does an amazing job of incorporating them then into the team and sort of walking that walk from the very beginning. So, they have team huddles that are informal, out in open space. They're encouraged to, shout out each other. They celebrate each other's wins. And if a big gift comes in the team is as excited as the person who gets it. And I think that those little things, they're again, I use that word intentionality over and over because I do really feel that is a part of what the secret sauce is here, is honestly always being intentional about how those things tie together. And even I think to Jeannie's point, I've been in advancement for quite a while, as has Jeannie. And the metrics conversation ebbs and flows, right? But sometimes it's all about that. And I think that it's that chicken or the egg conversation, right? I think sometimes if you don't overemphasize that, but you emphasize the things that we're trying to build in this team, those other things come. And so we've been very clear with our gift officers, that, and we all know this about the advancement industry, it takes a while to ramp up, right? And we've built a completely new team. So there is not high pressure in the beginning on our gift officers, the new gift officers, to produce. They're expected to have visits, they're expected to work their portfolio, but no one is sitting there going, whoa, you haven't had X number of visits this month right away, right? Because we are telling them the first thing we want them to do is to figure out how to, be an additive part of the team. Then, as over time, metrics come, right? And the emphasis gets stronger. And I think that has also been, because we have gift officers who, in the interview process, they're like, okay, so how many people are going to be in my portfolio, and what is the expectation in the first 60 to 90 days? And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The expectation is actually for you to get to know the team, for you to get to know LMU. And then we'll start talking about absolutely, and the metrics are in their job descriptions, we'll get there. But we don't spend a ton of time in the beginning talking about that. We talk much more about the team we're trying to build because we know that we will get to the other thing if we do that right.
I'll just add that what pleases me the most in seeing the team work together is they're learning from each other. If somebody has had success or has written a great proposal or has something, again, reinforcing relationships, people are being really thoughtful now about, oh, you know, my colleague is working on this gift with this donor. I have some information that could be useful to them. And there's just this exchange of ideas and support for each other that um, really helps them be resilient. Our office is undergoing leadership change, and the team is really solid. They're just continuing to do their work because you know they've got their colleagues supporting them.
That's really great. And it's so nice to hear because this is, fundraising is so many metrics. And it's nice to hear that in the first, 30, 60, 90 days, it's, whoa, wait a minute. It's not about metrics and getting out there. It's more about really understanding whether it's the dean or the school, and, LMU as a whole. So that's really nice. Um, Kind of closing out, what are some interview tips that you might give to candidates that are on a job search? Anything from resumes, cover letter, thank you notes.
Um, I I have so many thoughts on this. First, really do the homework so that you come with good questions. I think I think that is how candidates distinguish themselves. First of all, in the cover letter, that you see that they've researched, the institution and the organization. But even even during the interview process, asking, you know, the person across from you questions about who they are, uh, beyond, the standard question is, what's your management style? Is that really what you want to know? Um, it's your opportunity to show what are you going to be like in a donor meeting?
Mhm.
Are you a thoughtful, curious, um, engaging conversationalist? You have to kind of show me that you're going to be worth a donor making time to see you and that you're prepared. And Kathy and I, always the follow up thank you. These days it's all via email as opposed to a handwritten note, although I've gotten a couple of those. But a thoughtful follow up instead of sort of the kind of canned response. Was there something in the conversation that you can use to kind of, reinforce a particular skill that you bring or underscore your interest? Again, back to mission. But how do you make yourself memorable in a good way? That you are going to be a good team member, that you are going to add value, and that you're somebody that we'd like to kind of spend time with.
And I think just in summary, Jeannie's so right. I mean, I think it starts with doing your homework because that shows in your cover letter, right?
Mhm.
Which a strong cover letter is important. Um, Strong and tight too, right? We don't need your life story in the cover letter, but it would be really great to have an understanding of why you're interested in this job. Again, it's your why, right? And if you've done your homework, you can do that. I think then you come to the interview with that positive energy, curiosity. I know that word comes up over and over, but Jeannie and I look for that in every way, including the questions you ask, right? Both about the work and about the team and those and about Jeannie and I, right? And I think that is because we tag team these interviews so that you have opportunity to ask, two people questions about those things with kind of varying backgrounds. And, one of the things we do is we always introduce ourselves at the beginning of an interview, and then we ask the candidate to introduce themselves. And then we feel like they have sort of information in front of them that they can use to start asking those good questions, right? And then I would say, and that, absolutely a thank you note. And to Jeannie's point, a thoughtful thank you note, one that picks up something from, what you talked about or, what you shared in your cover letter and then in the interview. And I would say speedy. don't wait too long, especially because email's quick these days. It should come within 24 hours of that interview. For us, if it doesn't, we start to get nervous. In fact, we kind of get nervous if, depending upon, no expectation that it's going to happen in the middle of the night, but that it's a pretty quick
Right.
follow-up saying, gee, that was I really enjoyed meeting you and I'm super excited about next steps, right? So for us, I think it's those things, right? Do your homework, write a good cover letter because it shows you care. Come to the interview with good energy and then follow up, and pick up on, not just, so none of that can feel canned for us. It needs to really feel like it's plugged into the conversation that you had with the interviewers.
And I'll put in a comment. I know we had one candidate use AI to generate their thank you letter, because this candidate had spoken about their use of AI. My name was spelled wrong, and there's no, in this business, there is no replacement for personal, thoughtful attention.
Absolutely.
Well, ironically, even in that example, I think for us, what it shows too is back to that thing we were talking about with regard to intentionality, right? I'd rather have a thank you note, that isn't so incredibly well constructed from an AI perspective that it picks up everything, but something that continues to channel sort of that genuine, authentic energy we're looking for from a candidate.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for your valuable insight and thoughtfulness, and authenticity around interviewing and hiring and strengthening team culture. We really appreciate it. Thank you.